let's get into Darkness Assassin and get you into how to play Darkness in operations. This is the tank spec for the Assassin. And the first thing we're going to cover is your talent points. We're going to pick up Antagonizing Volts in 23. This increases the critical strike chance and threat that we get from our Deprivating Volts. We're going to go to 27 and get Energized Shock. This makes our shock critical hit damage is increased by 50%. And when we deal damage with our shock, it extends the duration of our Mind Control. Mind Control is our taunt for the Assassin tank. At 39, we're going to pick up Dusk Ward. Each time we consume a Dark Ward charge, the cooldown of our Force Cloak is going to be reduced by 2 seconds. And I'll get into the Force Cloak here in a minute. At 43, we're going to go with Reckless Defense. Consuming a charge of Recklessness grants you and nearby allies Reckless Defense, increasing your damage reduction by 5% per stack. And Reckless Defense stacks 3 times, so this can be a 15% damage reduction. And at 51, we are going to pick up Formless Phantom. This reduces all damage taken while stunned by 30%. Now, as a tank, you're going to sit in stuns a lot. So this is a huge talent point to pick up. At 64, we're going to go with Force Phase. This makes Force Speed and Phantom Stride grant Force Phase, which removes all movement impairing effects and grants immunity to them for 2 seconds. Again, we're going to get CC'd a lot as a tank, and so being able to get out of any roots or things that we get stuck in is going to be a huge need. At 68, we're going to go with Severing Slash. This doesn't have the huge damage component that it does for Deception, but the other two are not even usable on bosses. Whirlwind can't be used on a boss. Overload knocks things away from you, and you don't want to knock stuff away from you when you're tanking. You want to group them up. So we're kind of defaulted to Severing Slash. At 73, we're going to go with Shroud of Madness, which activating Force Cloak gets us 2 seconds of Force Shroud. Now, what is Force Shroud? Force Shroud is a purge. It's a self-cleanse that purges all the debuffs off of you and gives you 200% resist to force and tech attacks for 3 seconds. This is going to be kind of our way of cheesing a lot of mechanics while we're tanking, because we're going to be able to reset a lot of tank stacks on ourselves without having a second tank needed on most case scenarios. So covering the gear, we are looking at Ward of Continuum as a tactical. This makes it so our Dark Ward has 10 charges, and Dark Bulwark can no longer restore any charges, but consuming a charge of Dark Ward increases our defense rating by 1%, stacking 10 times. We're not worried about the 20 seconds that it lasts, because we're going to keep Dark Ward up all of the time. It's going to increase our chance to shield attacks, and every time that one of those charges is consumed, we're getting a 1% defense rating from it. So it's just a huge defensive tool to always keep your Dark Ward up. We're going to go with the Tristan's Retort package. Now, for Assassin tanks specifically, our shielding chance is through the roof because Dark Ward gives us 18% additional shield chance. So we're going to be using or proccing this Retort package all the time, which shielding an attack deals an amount of weapon damage back to 8 enemies within 5 meters. It can only occur every 3 seconds. It's going to occur every 3 seconds. So you're going to get a good little AoE weapon damage attack that's not even on a global. It's passive. It just hits. And it's an AoE hit. So it's going to help you with holding AoE threat, picking up AoE mobs, picking up single target mobs, constantly putting damage back to the attackers, and generating threat. The other one is going to be Ballast Point Package. This makes it so our deflection grants ballistic immunity for 6 seconds, giving you immunity to movement impairing effects, knockdowns, and physics. Again, we get stunned a lot as a tank, so having immunity is a nice thing to put a feather in our hat on. We're going to use anything that we can to reduce damage when we're stunned, or to completely negate being stunned as a tank. So the rotation for Assassin tank is going to end up being keeping Dark Ward up 24/7. It has a 10-second cooldown. Also, Wither has a 10-second cooldown, and it's an AoE hit. Also, Discharge has a 10-second cooldown, and it's an AoE hit. Shock only has a 6-second cooldown, but we're likely going to end up using it every 10 seconds, since all of our windows here are 10 seconds. And it hits one target. Shock builds this Harness Darkness ability that we have, and Wither also builds Harness Darkness, which is going to be making our deprivating bolts glow once it hits 3 stacks. That's when we can use our deprivating bolts. It's going to be a channeled ability that does a boatload of damage and threat. This is also a ranged ability. You can use it while you're not next to a target to kind of hold threat on things when you're kind of running away from them, or when you're not going to be able to be next to them on melee. Outside of that window, you can use Maul and Thrash. We want to use Maul when it's glowing, and it glows whenever we use Thrash. This makes Maul use 50% less force whenever it's glowing, and that can proc anytime that we use Thrash. So that's when we're going to want to fit Maul in. Now, for AoE, we also have a Severing Slash, and we talked about how Wither is an AoE, and Discharge is an AoE ability, plus we have an AoE Taunt. Assassin tanks have buku amounts of AoE threat and AoE damage. And also, to cheese mechanics, we talked about how we can use Force Shroud. In our talent tree, we picked up that Shroud of Madness, a talent that allows us to get 2 seconds of Force Shroud whenever we activate Force Cloak. So Force Cloak will also use Force Shroud. However, once you Force Cloak, you're gonna lose threat on the target you're on, so you have to immediately taunt it. Just keep that in mind when you use your cloak, because you're dropping combat. Tanks generally follow a rule of thumb where you want equal absorb to equal shield rating. So however you gear, you want to have about a 50-50 stat allocation to shield rating and shield absorb. This will help reduce the amount of damage that you take. Your shield rating increases the chance that you will block an attack, and the shield absorption will say how much damage that block is going to do. We also have cooldowns like Recklessness, which we talked about from our talents, that will decrease the damage that we all take for 5% per stack, stacking 3 times. Our adrenal is also going to be an absorption shell that we use. And we have deflection as a nice big defensive cooldown that's going to be a 2-minute cooldown, gives us 50% defense rating for 12 seconds. As a tank, we also have guard. This will help you hold threat against one of your big pumpers. You can put this on the highest DPS in your group, or you can place it on a healer on fights that are just healing and no damage is going out or anything like that, so your healer might end up having the highest threat of your group.